I wanted to do a quick review of Leaving Neverland by Dan Reed, which chronicles the experiences of James Safechuck and Wade Robeson in their how they were abused by Michael Jackson when they were children. There's been a lot of reviews about this film and a lot of strange interpretations of the film, most notably by Pitchfork, who I thought got the film completely backward and focused on a racialized interpretation of the film. However, I believe the film's power is held in the mantra to speak truth to evil. And, the filmmaker and others have said that this film is not about Michael Jackson, and I think Oprah said that as well in her Q&A, and I think that that's accurate. It's really not. It's about the experiences of these two men who had to deal with extreme darkness in their adulthoods and how they overcame that, or how they're attempting to overcome that. I think part of the process of overcoming the extreme evil and darkness that they endured in their life is to storytell, is to tell the story of what happened to them, and to, like I said, speak truth to evil, and in that way overcome the evil. And I marveled at the film. I think Dan Reed is some kind of film savant or genius. I haven't watched any of his other films, but it is a grueling film to watch. I don't really recommend it to anybody necessarily, because it's extremely horrific, and the details of the film are worse than horror films. However, the filmmaking process and the storytelling that was employed in this film is truly incredible, and I've never seen anything like it in any major motion picture. The level of storytelling, the way the storytelling provides catharsis for the two stars of the film and the victims simultaneously. Basically, I related to it in the sense that, when somebody endures trauma, what I found from this film is that there is a redemptive way, a catharsis, and a way of alleviating trauma by speaking truth to that trauma, to that evil. And anyone who has endured trauma in their life, if they can find a way to make it into narrative, use narratology, and to tell a story about that trauma, and in that way they get away from it. They get out from under it. They get that monkey off their back. And in my own life, I feel like the traumas that I've endured, I'm going to, well, not on the scale at all of what Robson and Safechuck had to endure as children. Every person endures certain traumas, and I feel like I can take the bad things that have occurred in my life. For example, my mother's death at a very young age. I can turn that tragedy into triumph by storytelling, by being able to process that trauma. And I think that where this film really shines is in the latter half of the film, where Dan Reed focuses on the lives of Robson and Safechuck after they became adult men, and they had to deal with depression, and they had to deal with these horrible feelings of self-loathing and hatred of self, and this incredibly darkness, this dark period in their life that they had to overcome, and by being participants in Dan Reed's film is a way to work through their trauma. And what I learned from that film is really important to me, and I think I'll carry it with me for a long time. The idea that telling your story is a way to liberate yourself and escape some of the problems that you've endured. And I guess I shouldn't use the word escape, because it's kind of the opposite of escaping. You're sort of declaring that maybe life didn't, you didn't get the easiest life, but by telling that story of the bad things that have happened to us, we're able to overcome those bad things. And in the case of Leaving Neverland, and in the case of Jimmy Safechuck and Wade Robson, it's obviously it's an extreme form of that, an extreme form of that liberation through narrative, through storytelling. Obviously, they didn't really have a choice; they had to speak out because um, otherwise, how could they live? How could they go on? And obviously they displayed a tremendous amount of bravery and courage. But I wouldn't like to diminish the role of Dan Reed. He's the one that put this vehicle together. If it wasn't for him, this project wouldn't have went anywhere, and these voices probably wouldn't have been heard. I feel like there's a tremendous amount of courage that was displayed by Dan Reed for being able to direct this film and knowing the right questions to ask and knowing the right focus of the film. It's not a hit piece on Michael Jackson. It's not a political film, or it's about these two men's lives, and it's an important film for that reason. It focuses on the right things, and a lot of reviewers got it wrong, like Pitchfork and other outlets that don't really understand the film. But I would consider Dan Reed a genius, even though I haven't watched his other films. I feel like what he did with this film was, Oprah says that it took 219 Oprah episodes to do what he did in 4 hours, and I think that's a laudable goal because he created a really singular achievement in film. That probably will be overlooked, especially from a filmmaking point of view, because of it being such a sensationalized topic. However, maybe in the future people will look at it almost like a 2001 Space Odyssey in terms of what it does about emboldening narrative in the lives of human beings and how we can escape the shackles of the traumas that have affected our lives and created darkness in our lives. And by telling the story of our traumas, we are able to empower ourselves in a way that takes the power away from that source of trauma and enables it to be an experience that one can grow from and realize that it's a part of our lives and it's something that changes us and mutates us in ways that can be bad, but also the fact that we can grow from it and become stronger people is the light kind of at the end of the tunnel. So I would definitely give this film 5 stars. If you're into filmmaking, if you're into great film, it's a must-see. If you're somebody who doesn't like horror films and doesn't like squeamish details, and don't avoid this film because it's traumatic. The details in this film are very traumatic. But like I said, the second half really is, if perhaps some of the people that are more sensitive to this material should just watch the second half, because there's a really great story here and a really great film here. And I think Dan Reed did something that hasn't been done in film. So, it's long, but the payoff's great, and it helped me to kind of understand my own demons and my own traumas, and like I said, not saying they're on the level of Wade and Jimmy Safechuck, but they're still, every person has to deal with darkness in their life, and they have to overcome it. And like I said, I feel like I was imprisoned by this traumatic experience of my mother dying when I was 8 years old, being killed by a drunk driver. But this film was able to contextualize it in a way where I understood that there's other people that endure traumas that are far worse than the trauma I experienced, but also that you by putting it into words and by experiencing it or re-experiencing it through storytelling, you're diminishing the effect it has over your life. But you're also it's hard to say. I mean, there's something that clicked in my brain when I was watching Jimmy Safechuck and Wade Robson talk. There was something just clicked in my brain about how you don't have to be, controlled, and you don't have to be diminished, and you don't have to be darkened. Your life doesn't have to be darkened by the bad things that happen to you. And that there's this way of, through storytelling, this film, what Leaving Neverland does is it shows you how storytelling can really be powerful and be a panacea, and how storytelling is a greater art form than the rest of the art forms, and painting and music the literary art form of storytelling through literature or through film. Basically, it's not a film in sort of visual images, but it's a film in terms of the narrative. You know, you could almost turn the monitor off and just listen to these voices telling these stories, and that's really where I relate to it. The literary effect of it. I was able to see how literature can be a panacea um, to one's trauma, and you can grow from tragedy, and perhaps that's what Shakespeare was getting at when he wrote all these tragedies. Anyway, I really enjoyed the film. I want to thank Dan Reed and, of course, Jimmy Safechuck and Wade Robson. Thanks, guys, for creating probably obviously the best film of the year. And there's no doubt in my mind why you guys got a standing O at the Sundance Film Festival. And you know, it's a one of a kind film, and it's really great art. And unfortunately, it comes from something so depraved and so disgusting and so desolate and so evil. But like I said, you speak truth to the evil, and all of a sudden, the evil evaporates. Thanks.